Julia, in 2011, you had a near-death experience in a car accident. Would you tell me how that came about? We, that is my partner at the time, my son and I, were on the way by car to see the family, to go for an excursion together. And after about an hour and a half driving in the car, I suddenly felt something is wrong here. I had the feeling that something really bad was about to happen, as if something was going to happen to me and someone wanted to say, something really bad is about to happen. I then said to my partner, I don't feel well. I have this feeling that something is about to happen. But he didn't take my feelings seriously and made me understand that nothing would happen, because he was driving very carefully, and because he only drives at about 45 miles per hour, so he felt that nothing could ever happen. And shortly afterwards, it did happen. We left the lane, but I only know this from stories. The driver had obviously oversteered into the oncoming lane, and we drove into a truck at 45 miles per hour on the passenger side, thereby bouncing off, but I still could remember that the truck was blue, for example. The car overturned several times, and when it came to a stop, I looked around inside the car. I knew exactly what had happened. I knew that we were in a car accident now. I looked over to the driver, and I saw him writhing and moaning in pain. And I looked into the back of the car to check on my son. And that was when I saw a hand unfasten his seatbelt. And then I knew, okay, my son is okay. I was not fully conscious, but yet, in fact, I was. So I heard the ambulance and the fire brigade in the distance very clearly. And at that moment, I said to myself, Julia, everything will be fine now. Help is coming. You can leave now. And in that very moment, I had my near-death experience. The feelings I subsequently had were very intense, and they kept me very busy long after the accident. First, I wanted to label the whole thing a dream, so that I thought I had dreamt it all. But these intense feelings I had while experiencing this continued to work on me. Well, as I said, first of all, I said to myself, now you can leave. I then noticed how I stepped out of my body. I couldn't look back, but I knew very well that I was leaving my body behind. I couldn't look at myself either. I felt very comfortable. I was doing very well. I had no pain, I had no worries, and I had no fear. And these were very strong and intense feelings. I saw the light, and I didn't want anything but to move toward it. In this light, I saw my grandma. I had a very strong bond with my grandmother, a very strong bond. And I saw her clearly in her dress, in the best of health, neither sick nor dead. She threw her hands up in despair, saying clearly and unambiguously to me, Julia, go back to your child immediately. In that very moment, my near-death experience had been lived. You said that you saw the light. Can you tell us what was the manner in which you perceived it? It was in the distance. It wasn't very close to me. It was, in fact, farther away, but it was very bright, and I felt the need to approach the light. Did you also notice the surroundings? No, I was focused on this light. I was focused on the positive feelings I was having, on the fact that I was fine, that I had no pain, no worries, no fear. And these were very nice feelings indeed. How long had your grandmother been deceased at this point? 3 years. Did you see the clothes she was wearing? Yes, she looked very beautiful, very healthy. She was wearing a very beautiful dress, and in fact, it was the dress we had chosen for her funeral. How was your convalescence? I had quite a quick recovery, even though I had life-threatening injuries, and I was suffering from numerous trauma, which meant that I had so many injuries that a body can no longer cope with it. As I said, these feelings that I had during this near-death experience never stopped to continue working inside me, so that I had to think about these intense feelings very often. As they were very beautiful as well, it was a very nice feeling indeed. There wasn't a bit of anything bad. It wasn't anything that made me feel sad. It was so very beautiful to experience. And because of these intense feelings that have gripped me ever since, I could no longer label it as a dream. Instead, I started researching about what it was that I was experiencing, thereby even taking into account the doctor's reports about how I was doing in this accident, and that they had to rescue me very quickly because I was getting worse and worse, so I was very close to death. How long did your recovery take? I was in hospital for 8 days, 4 days in intensive care, and another 4 days in the normal ward. But I have to say that I had a 1-year-old child at home, so I wanted to go home. And so I did come home with a good feeling, because the accident changed me for the better. The near-death experience changed me for the better. My way of thinking of death has changed because of this experience. So 6 years later, in 2017, you had another very impressive experience. What were the circumstances leading up to this experience? I had to witness a suicide. It was my partner who took his own life. And you don't get over something like this so easily. And shortly after this suicide happened, my sister visited me. Actually, the very next day, after she found out what I had gone through, what I had had to endure. But I sent her away. I didn't want her to be with me. And this was because somebody told me that my partner was coming to visit me. And I was even feeling it. I felt like he was speaking to me and telling me, "I'll only come when you are alone." He had already passed away at that point. Yes, the suicide had already happened. My sister just wanted to be there for me, but because of my intense feelings, that is, that I felt he would be coming, that he wanted to come to me and talk to me, I had to ask her to leave, because the encounter with my partner was so important for me. Sometimes I try to compare the near-death experience with the after-death contact in terms of which feeling was more intense, the one of the near-death experience or the one of the after-death contact. And I must say that it is quite clearly the one of the after-death contact that I experienced more intensely. Though I know that's not explainable for many, but for me, somehow, it is. Well, my sister stayed over one night, but then she left the next day because, as I have said, I asked her to leave, and I did this because I sensed that he was communicating with me, to tell me, I'll come, but only when you're alone. He then actually came. In fact, it was at night, and I had already gone to bed, knowing and feeling he will come to meet me. When he came, actually, I couldn't influence the situation either, nor could I change it. What felt like something challenging for me, not being able to change the situation, so I saw him coming to my apartment very clearly, wearing his everyday clothes that he always used to wear. He even had his backpack with him. He walked through the apartment, sort of very agitated, very nervous, very stirred, but he put his backpack on the place where he always used to put it, and he sat down on the sofa, staying there for a moment, and I realized that he was communicating with me on a different level. I sensed what he wanted to say to me without actually speaking. He did not speak as we are used to speaking, but gave me to understand in quite a different manner. What he wanted to tell me now was that he wanted to apologize for the situation. That the suicide thing had happened. After a while, I was still in bed and I felt the need to get up. I also pinched myself in order to be sure that I was awake, that I was clear-headed, and that this really was happening. He then stood in the bedroom doorway, and I saw him standing there looking at me and talking to me without words and apologizing, because it hurt him a lot to see me crying and suffering like that, and that this wasn't what he wanted. I asked him to sit with me. I said to him several times, "Please sit with me." But he didn't sit with me, but remained standing in the doorway for a while, just looking at me. He also leaned his head against the door frame and continued looking at me. I said to him again several times, "Please sit with me." He then was still standing there for a while, and I lay down and said to myself, "I'm trying to go back to sleep now." And he still was standing there, waiting for me to fall asleep. And then he left. He went out the door and said goodbye to me. And that wasn't the only after-death contact I had with him. I had two more. I had gone to a concert. It was our music. We always wanted to go to a concert like this together, But now I went there alone with him in my heart, and the hall was filling up, and the row in the opera hall where I was sitting was already filled. Only the seat to my right was not yet filled. It was still empty. And I prayed and gave thanks that I was allowed to share this experience. And I gave thanks that I felt him to be with me. But I also prayed that it would change, because it was so hard for me to cope with that he was with me in a different manner than before, but somehow not as he used to be there before. Did you see your husband at this concert, or did you just feel him around you? I didn't see him, not that, but I felt him. I felt something telling me, I'm with you for this concert. We're going to enjoy this together. And I prayed to God that he would redeem me. And when the concert started and my prayers were answered, the seat next to me filled up. Well, by what you have told me, I might have detected that he wasn't very happy about his suicide. That's quite true. He was very upset and nervous. And he made me to understand that he was very, very sorry about it. He was very sorry for the suicide. You said that you have had another after-death contact. Yes, it was the last one. I moved from one apartment to another, and in the process of the move, he made me understand that he would not be able to come to me again, that I had to start over and that I should start over, that I was allowed to be happy. It was again as if he was saying goodbye to me again, now letting me go my own way. From this point in time, when he said goodbye to me then and told me, I am not coming with you, I no longer perceived him in the same way. He is, of course, still with me and within me, within my heart, in my thoughts, but I no longer feel him in a spiritual manner. Shortly after Christmas in 2019, you had yet another experience that remains unforgettable for you. Yes, in fact, it was on Boxing Day, that is, the day after Christmas. And I was rather confused that day, also upset. I had very intense, very strong feelings. Well, I had had a dream the night before. I dreamt of his funeral, but I didn't experience or feel this funeral as something sad, something bad, but rather as something beautiful. It was a very nice, happy funeral, and the dream made me understand that everything is fine. I saw his father, who also again told me in this special, different manner, things are all right. We're all united again. And after that dream, I was very upset, very confused. His father died a year later, just before Christmas. In that sense, you were sort of anticipating the death of your father-in-law. Could we put it like that? Yes, that's true, but more in a positive sense, because this was actually a very happy celebration, although it was a funeral. I felt that they were reunited and that everything was actually fine. How did this near-death experience and these particular experiences change your thinking about death, or how did it influence your life? I would say very positively, after the near-death experience, that my way of thinking about death has completely changed. Now, death for me is something beautiful. I'm looking forward to death. I'm not afraid of death. I know that it's something beautiful. I know that you feel good about it. So that the near-death experience, as well as the after-death contacts, have changed my attitude toward death for the positive. And I'm so thankful that I was allowed to experience something like this. Julia, thank you so very much for the interview. Gladly, and thank you too.